The following, which is solely for educational and entertainment purposes, is the exact federal courtroom testimony of the Sean Diddy Combs trial, as reported by Inner City. Before we begin, viewer discretion is strongly advised, with no prior notice and no entourage. Kid Rock suddenly burst into the federal courthouse with a folder that would rip through the music industry's quiet like a wrecking ball. It was not about music or rivalry. Rather, it was about the truth, with decades worth of secrets simmering beneath the surface. Rock entered, demanded to be heard, and then revealed a series of shocking truths that left the crowd in disbelief. Nobody, not even the court or the media, saw it coming when it came to Diddy's defense, but the trial would never be the same after that because Kid Rock didn't come to talk. He came to expose what he had a record of abuse and silence regarding. Spying could be the ultimate straw for an empire that believed it could outlast everyone. Federal courtrooms are designed for formality and sluggish, practiced rhythms. The double doors creaking open at 11:12 a.m. was the first sound to break the routine of movements and strict security on the 7th day of the Diddy trial. People started turning. They looked around, expecting a clerk or even a late jury, but instead they saw a man wearing sunglasses and a black tailored suit carrying a heavy folder with a hard spine and a gold clip. His gait was firm and his face was unreadable. Kid Rock walked directly to the front left bench of the gallery and sat down, eyes fixed on the judge, without saying a word or pausing to seek approval. Reporters immediately started making notes in their notebooks. The bailiff stopped in the middle of his step, and the prosecutors looked at one another, but the most obvious response came from Dylan himself. He looked up from a side chat with his lawyer, and his lawyer's eyes fell straight on Rock, tightening his lips. One juror, later Kid Rock, had long been seen as a cultural outsider to Diddy's well-maintained kingdom. He didn't play the Hollywood game, he didn't go to those notorious after-parties, and he was like seeing a balloon blow in slow motion. Wasn't. Constrained by the unseen restrictions that kept people silent, so when he produced a thick, sealed official folder, the crowd erupted in applause. The judge, looking shocked but calm, inquired as to whether he was here in relation to the. There was no delay, no confusion, and the prosecution's witness list. Rock calmly responded, "I have material I've been holding on to for years. It's time someone looked at it." The courtroom sat in eerie silence for the next 12 minutes as the judge called a procedural halt, summoned a brief sidebar, and then allowed Rock's folder to be handed over to the clerk. It was then placed directly on the judge's bench. We will admit this as evidence under corroborating material related to pattern of behavior. She turned the pages one by one, and when she looked up, her expression had changed. The courtroom exploded, not with a sound, but in energy. Something had shifted, and Diddy knew it. The contents of the folder weren't what anyone expected. Not grainy photos, not anonymous allegations. They were crisp, organized, cross-referenced, court-certified, metadata backed up each timeline entry, at least 5 sworn. Statements from former security guards, housekeepers, drivers, and personal assistants, printed emails, travel records, and incident reports from private security firms hired by Diddy's team. This wasn't gossip. It was evidence stacked, verified, timed. The first document introduced to the jury was a 2017 incident report from a Miami estate manager, detailing how a female guest had tried to leave a party and was told via radio she doesn't leave until he states the guest was Cassie. Next came an image of internal communications from a hotel chain that commonly hosted Diddy's parties, citing privacy limitations for VIPs with prior incident flags. Identities were censored, but the context was apparent. These weren't usual parties. The third element was what shattered the jury's composure. A sworn affidavit from a former audio tech who had worked Diddy's tour in 2016. In it, he stated seeing surveillance monitors in the basement of a private complex feeds, showing numerous rooms during private sessions, all documented and time-stamped. He alleged the recordings were stored on external drives and managed solely by a staff member identified in the document. In addition to describing what he observed, he also provided the network, storage systems model numbers, the camera model numbers, and the precise dates of the drive's upgrades for Cassie's lawyers. Diddy's lawyers, on the other hand, began scanning through their binders in search of any procedural impediment, but it was too late. They didn't flinch and nodded slowly, confirming that this matched the claims made earlier in the trial. Lately, the jury was listening to the evidence, and for the first time, they were seeing Cassie's shadow in icy, clinical precision, rather than just hearing her account. Kid Rock remained motionless the entire time, his hands folded, and he never grinned, never spoke, just observed. When the court reconvened following a brief break, the judge leaned forward and said, "Mr. Ritchie, if you are ready to make a statement, the court will hear it." Kid Rock stood, but he didn't. "I didn't come here to make headlines. I came here because the truth has been buried under platinum plaques and billion-dollar smiles for too damn long," he declared without clearing his throat or bringing notes. He continued by saying that he had received emails, texts, and even late-night phone calls from people who were too shy to speak in public throughout the years, and that most of them seemed too unbelievable to be true until I've toured with Monsters and Saints Rock, and I've ignored more than I should have when stories began repeating the same words, tone, pain, and voices, all pointing in the same direction. However, when I saw that clip of Cassie. Before speaking in the interview, I noticed something over her shoulder. Fear doesn't lie. He claimed to have gotten the folder contents over the course of 5 years from unnamed sources, ex-employees, and he testified that he checked every item before giving it to Cassie's legal team, telling them he would testify if necessary. "And now here I am," he added, "not because I'm a hero, but you don't scare me, you never did," he said, locking eyes with Diddy in the courtroom. "I'm tired of this industry consuming people and calling it art." Was silent, and the jury listened intently to what he said. The trial's tone was forever altered when he sat down. It was more than simply testimony. It was a reckoning, and Kid Rock had fired the first true shot. The courtroom fell silent as the prosecutors turned to a witness log that Kid Rock's testimony had just unlocked. Witness number 9 was a woman named Cynthia M.A., former personal chef hired for Diddy's weekend mansion retreats in Los Angeles from 2016 to 2019. She wasn't there. To guess, she came armed with receipts, payment logs, kitchen delivery, orders and schedules that lined up with the same nights Cassie had stated she was isolated, confined, or readied for private entertainment events. When asked by the prosecutor to explain the environment in the household, Cynthia spoke slowly and with discomfort. There were rules, real strict ones. You couldn't look Cassie in the eye unless she looked at you first. You couldn't speak unless Mr. Comey's gave you permission. One time I asked if she wanted avocado on her salad. He heard me and made someone else finish the day's prep. I never talked to her again. She described a bizarre system of code staff members used colors to indicate Cassie's emotional state. Green indicated that she was ready and at ease, yellow indicated that she was crying or unsteady, and red indicated that the party should be canceled, though this didn't happen frequently because someone always fixed her before it got out of hand. Jurors started taking frantic notes after hearing her testimony, which made them tremble. The prosecution displayed digital logs that Cynthia had supplied of kitchen deliveries that arrived during private events, and Cassie's name was Cynthia. Testified that she once seen Cassie enter the kitchen at 1 Maui, but the word VIP was blacked out on every record. I'm crying, holding a bathrobe, and discreetly asking if she could use the. She murmured, "I can't find my phone, I think he took it again." And the chef refused out of fear of the repercussions. 2 weeks later, it was replaced, but she never forgot the expression on Cassie's face when I left, since it began to feel less a job and more like being a part of something I didn't want to see. Prosecutors then presented Exhibit 78B, which is a list of access logs and timestamps from 3 of the. This information was initially provided by an unknown source on Diddy's assets, but it was verified by chain of custody records that linked it to a former security consultant who was formerly employed directly by January 5, 2018, Freak Room 2 feed adjusted at 8:42 p. Me's visitor had matched to Cassie Ventura, no exit log recorded until 2:03 a.m. was one of the entries for badboyentertainment.m. The jury leaned in closer. The term Freak Room had only been rumored in blogs, message boards, and cryptic former artist interviews, but here it was on paper, verified. The prosecution explained that Freak Room referred to multiple guest bedrooms at Diddy's Miami and Los Angeles mansions, tricked out with low-lit ceiling lights, floor-length mirrors, hidden cameras, and two-way glass. Allegedly, the recordings from these rooms were encrypted, stored in external vaults, and cataloged under pseudonyms to prevent any direct tie to their contents. And it was Kid Rock who had helped uncover them. He'd provided a USB drive turned over to prosecutors 2 weeks previously containing partial directory files with folder names like Baker House Sessions, Studio 19 Visits, and VIP1 Raw. Some files were corrupted, Others were encrypted, but audio techs stated they were able to obtain Kia male voice that the technician identified as audibly consistent with Dylan's known recordings can be heard in one of the decrypted audio files played behind closed doors, along with metadata that demonstrated the file's creation date and location. The room in question matched the footage log from January 5th, but Diddy's lawyers protested, claiming that the proof was, "She's not leaving, get the phone, and shut the mirror." Non-conclusive, but the judge upheld it, stating that the patterns were sufficiently substantial. Kid Rock sat silently while the jury was shown a timeline on screen that connected the events of Cassie's lawsuit with guest logs, recordings, and video timestamps from the drive. This was no longer merely testimony, it was architecture, and it was falling apart on duty. The atmosphere completely altered when the next witness, a former recording engineer from Bad Boy's main studio in New York, he wished to be named only as Dave. And when questioned, he spent no time getting to the issue. There was a culture of shutting up if you saw something, you didn't see it. If you heard anything, you didn't unless you wanted to be let go that week. Dave said he remembers a night in early 2019 where Cassie arrived to the studio visibly shaken. He claimed she wasn't on the schedule, yet was ushered into a side room labeled Green Room. 2, the same nickname given in internal documents to one of the surveillance-heavy areas at the studio. An assistant questioned Diddy if she should be sent home. Diddy's answer: "She'll go when I say, she's done." Dave captured that statement on his phone, and when asked by the prosecution if he still had the file, he nodded. "I emailed it to myself from my personal account, didn't trust the cloud." The courtroom fell still as the prosecution played a cleaned-up version of the audio. When juror number 4 began to wince and close their eyes, the prosecution made its most audacious move yet. They invited Kid Rock back to the courtroom. The voice was definitely Diddy, with a tone that was cold, commanding, and cutting. He stated plainly, "I had nothing to gain, everything to lose. But when a system like this goes concealed for this long, the only way to explain why I came forward is to stand this time as a character witness, not just to support Cassie. This isn't about canceling a man. Rather, it's about releasing individuals from the shackles of a culture that stated, 'You better keep your mouth shut or your career's over.' To break it is to name it. I don't care what it costs because what I saw still keeps me up," he said, looking across the room at the lawyers, the gallery, and the jury rather than at Dodie. He then stepped aside before any defense argument could be made. By the 7th part of the day, the court was no longer responding with shock, and Kid Rock had walked away unfazed, looking like a man whose empire had been built on ice and was now beginning to crumble under his feet. They sat in startled quiet, taking in the enormity of what had just been revealed. Prosecutors weren't only targeting Diddy's individual actions, they were targeting the entire system that made it possible. The prosecution next presented paperwork from a now-defunct corporation named Shadow Track Entertainment, a sham production company tied to Diddy through Bad Boy. Kid Rock had just given them the blueprint. Subsidiaries. The business had no social media presence, no website, and no public record of releases, but its sole goal was to compensate the staff of Diddy's private events. The ledgers identified caterers, event planners, and all of the safety escorts who used Shadow Track to sign NDAs and confidentiality agreements included strangely specific clauses such as, "Attendee silence shall be maintained under penalty of forfeiture and physical kid." Rock was called back for clarification and stated that he first discovered Shadow Track while looking over tax records that were sent to him. His presence within estate spaces will be deemed consent to audio and video capture. Using an anonymous source, a former accountant who claimed to have been fired for asking too many questions showed me a copy of a tax statement. At first, I had no idea what he was showing me, but as I dug deeper, I discovered. He explained how one item drew his attention: a $12,000 payment marked equipment sanitation, and a second $9,000 listing for session monitoring 2 nights these days, despite the fact that there were dozens of people being paid to watch but never talk. Dates on the entries corresponded with the nights of Cassie's initial evidence, when she talked of being ready for Dylan's more private activities. The jury started to move uneasily, and the prosecution presented one last item to emphasize the point. An internal HR memo from Bad Boy Enterprises, which was obtained through a subpoena, stated that staff members were urged to refrain from having personal connections with VIP guests, particularly on red zone weekends. Weekends were formerly times of greater executive discretion and privacy, but now it wasn't just Dottie. Instead, The corporate apparatus that had been put in place to keep him safe had simply shattered it open with just a folder and a microphone. The courtroom atmosphere had changed by the afternoon break, and Diddy's defense team appeared to be a crew observing a sinking ship as their arguments grew weaker and more procedural objections were being ignored by the jury. Was locked in, and then the unexpected witness arrived. Her name was Sony Lane, a former executive producer of a 2015 MTV special that featured Diddy. She had been quiet for almost 10 years, but she was motivated by Kid Rock's. She had gotten in touch with the prosecution that morning, and the judge gave her permission to testify. She told the judge about a shoot at one of Daisy's New York pennities, where Cassie was supposed to make a quick appearance. When Cassie came, she appeared ill, exhausted, and nearly empty. But what really caught my attention was that Diddy told several crew members to leave the set because he didn't want anyone to ruin the atmosphere. He then closed the doors and they remained closed. For over 45 minutes, when asked what transpired when the doors reopened, Sonia turned to face the jury and remarked, "He came out smiling and Cassie came out crying." That one line caused one juror to drop their pen and another juror to clench their fists. Their fists, Child Rock, still seated in the gallery, didn't move, but his influence was written throughout the courtroom. Diddy's attorney tried to request for a recess to study the last-minute edition of Sonia Lane's testimony, but the judge wasn't having it. This court has been more than patient. We proceed. Diddy's face by then had lost all trace of swagger. His lips were drawn thin. His stare had gone empty. The man who once strutted through red carpets and Super Bowl stages now looked like someone who didn't recognize his own future before court adjourned. The judge allowed Kid Rock to deliver a final speech, an uncommon gesture, but one permitted given his official cooperation and past testimony. He stood slowly. When I initially arrived here, I assumed that I would be written off as a loudmouth rocker with a grudge, and perhaps I am, but after seeing what I saw, I realized that I couldn't allow it to fester in my mind any longer. He straightened his suit and moved to the center of the exhibition. He paused. "A lot of people will wonder why I'm even involved. What business is it of mine?" The answer's simple. It's everybody's business when the mighty prey on the powerless, motioned toward Cassie. That woman sat in silence for years because she felt no one would believe her, because the man she was up against had the world in his pocket. He took a big breath. "Well, I'm here to say we believe you. I believe you, and given what I witnessed in this courtroom today." When he sat down, the courtroom didn't applaud or clap, but everyone's eyes went to Diddy, and for the first time, he didn't appear defiant. Instead, he looked terrified. The court adjourned for the day outdoors. The following morning, before the sun had fully risen, headlines exploded like firecrackers, exposing Kid Rock and Diddy Hollywood. However, this wasn't just a media frenzy. Something had congressmen started, demanding a reform of the entertainment industry's NDA and power structures after the trial testimony shocked Capitol Hill in a matter of hours. Senator Lisa Donnelly spoke on, "This is about a culture that has been operating in the shadows for too long, not just about one artist or one victim," stated MSNBC. At least 4 well-known performers made statements by lunchtime. A longtime colleague opted to distance themselves from Diddy in a well-crafted Instagram post saying, "In light of recent testimony, I've decided to suspend all professional ties and reevaluate past partnerships." Next came the financial. In a devastating but quiet update, a major streaming site said that all of the Diddy-produced projects will be temporarily taken down, awaiting internal investigation. Additionally, a company that had previously used him in a national campaign deleted all traces of the footage and put their agreement on indefinite hold. But the most sobering moment occurred when a fan's taped conversation from years ago appeared on the internet. At the time, it was hardly noticeable, but in it, Cassie was when asked what guidance she would give young women attempting to enter the music industry, she replied, "In hindsight, trust your gut. Don't let the glitz blind you. Not every opportunity is safe now." Her response was kind, haunted, and suddenly horrifying. He left the courthouse that evening, flanked by quiet security and an army of flashbulbs, without saying a word, waving, or looking up. But the world was finally paying attention. The empire he had built wasn't crumbling. Rather, it was being broken down piece by testimony, truth, and the one man who decided to speak up when it was safer to be quiet. Child Rock.